If someone had told me that I would one day marry the girl who had irritated me since childhood, and that I'd gladly risk everything to protect her and love her beyond reason, I would have laughed them out of the room. The golden cage of Manhattan's upper crust held two princesses raised in parallel worlds that never seemed to align. They were tethered not by affection, but by their father's ironclad bond, their rivalry as inevitable as it was enduring. Alexandra Lexa Sterling, the crown jewel of the Sterling Group, a dynasty of five-star hotels known for discreet extravagance and an aura of icy perfection, embodied that legacy at 25. Tall, striking, with hair like winter moonlight and eyes carved from frozen steel, Lexa was the brand made flesh. Her existence was a study in grayscale, tailored black suits, pale silk, and immaculate white offices stripped of warmth or clutter. She carried herself like a predator on the prowl, her voice a sharpened instrument that sliced cleanly through boardroom chatter and polite society alike. Cynicism clung to her like a second skin, and her intensity had been forged under her father's relentless expectations. To Lexa, happiness was inefficiency, and vulnerability was nothing short of a fatal weakness. Sophia Safi Rossi, the sole heir to Rossi Couture, a vibrant, trend-setting fashion conglomerate known for bold colors, joyful designs, and empowering femininity. Safi, 23, was sunshine personified. Her warm brown eyes sparkled with perpetual optimism. Her cascading chestnut hair seemed perpetually windswept with energy, and her laugh was a bright, infectious melody. She dressed in a kaleidoscope of her own label's creations, flowing skirts, vibrant knits, patterns that danced. Her father's warmth and the creative chaos of the fashion world nurtured her effervescent spirit. She believed fiercely in connection, in finding the good and feeling everything intensely. Her energy was boundless, her chatter a constant stream of ideas, observations, and genuine enthusiasm that could fill any room, often to Lexa's acute discomfort. The forged bond, fathers Arthur Sterling and Gabriel Rossi, childhood friends who climbed the corporate ladder together, one building fortresses of stone and steel, the other empires of fabric and fantasy. Their bond was ironclad, forged in shared struggles and triumphs. They envisioned their daughters continuing this legacy side by side. Picnics in the Hamptons, joint Christmases at the Sterling penthouse, summers at the Rossi Villa in Spain. These were mandatory events on the girls' calendars. The fractured friendship, daughters. From their earliest memories, Lexa and Safi clashed like storm fronts meeting sunshine. The Hamptons, age 7. Lexa meticulously building a symmetrical sandcastle glared as Safi, shrieking with laughter, accidentally kicked a wave that obliterated half of it. Safi's tearful apology, "It was an accident." Lexa, "Let's build a bigger, better one," was met with icy silence and Lexa stomping off to read alone indoors. The Sterling penthouse, age 12, a formal Christmas dinner. Lexa sat perfectly still answering questions about her advanced mathematics tutor in clipped tones. Safi, buzzing from sugar plums, chatted about her new puppy, the calla lila downstairs, the magic of the snow. Lexa finally snapped, "Must you be so relentlessly loud? It's exhausting." Safi's smile faltered for a fraction of a second before doubling down, deliberately knocking a bread roll slightly towards Lexa's pristine place setting. Rossi Villa, Spain. Age 16, Safi dragged Lexa to a vibrant local fiesta. The pulsing music, swirling colors, and press of bodies were Lexa's personal hell. She retreated to a shadowed corner, nursing a mineral water, radiating disdain. Safi, flushed and beautiful in a fiery red dress, tried to coax her onto the dance floor. "Live a little, Ice Queen." Lexa's retort was venomous. "Some of us have dignity, Rossi, and standards." Safi danced away, but her smile that night held a brittle edge. Lexa pretended not to see the unseen currents. Safi's secret. Through every barb, every icy glare, Safi carried a torch she barely understood herself. It started as childhood. Admiration for Lexa's fierce independence, her sharp mind. By adolescence, it had morphed into a confusing, persistent crush. She noticed the way the light caught the silver blonde strands of Lexa's hair, the surprising elegance of her long fingers, the rare, devastatingly beautiful curve of her lips when sarcasm almost became a smile. Safi's overtures, the forced proximity, the relentless cheer, were partly defiance, partly a desperate, clumsy attempt to chip through the ice and reach the girl beneath. She cataloged Lexa's rare expressions, the subtle flicker of something other than annoyance when Safi achieved something impressive, like essaying an exam Lexa thought was beneath her notice. This secret yearning made Lexa's rejection sting far more than she ever let on. Lexa's deflection. Lexa found Safi's constant presence, her noise, her color, deeply unnerving. It felt like an assault on her carefully controlled environment. Yet she noticed. She noticed the genuine kindness Safi showed to staff, the fierce loyalty she had for her friends, the surprising shrewdness beneath the bubbly exterior when discussing Rossi couture. The crush? Lexa was neither blind nor stupid. She saw the lingering glances, the extra effort Safi put in around her. It terrified her. Vulnerability was weakness, and Safi represented pure, unguarded emotional exposure. So Lexa doubled down on the ice. She perfected the dismissive snort, the cutting remark, the glacial indifference. She told herself Safi's crush was merely infatuation with the unattainable, a childish phase. She pretended the occasional pang of something when Safi's smile dimmed because of her was just irritation. Caring was a liability she couldn't afford. The present-day divide. Now, as young women navigating their inheritances, the gulf seemed wider than ever. Lexa operated from her stark minimalist office atop the Sterling Tower, her domain a temple to efficiency and control. Safi worked from the vibrant, chaotic design studios of Rossi Couture, a whirlwind of fabric swatches and laughter. Their paths crossed only at obligatory functions, charity galas, board meetings where their fathers presided, the rare forced family dinner. The interactions followed a familiar script. Safi's bright greeting, Lexa's curt nod or monosyllabic reply, Safi, filling the awkward silence with chatter, Lexa eventually excusing herself with palpable relief. The world saw the ice princess and the sunshine perpetually at odds, a fascinating study in contrasts. Only Safi knew the depth of her own hidden longing. Only Lexa felt the unsettling fissures in her own frozen facade when not particularly irritating. Sunshine was absent. Their father's dream of unity seemed like a cruel joke. Little did they know, a bombshell was about to detonate, shattering the fragile stalemate and forcing these opposing forces into an impossible collision course. The stage was set not for harmony, but for a war, or perhaps the most unlikely merger of all. Part 2. The Marriage Ultimatum. The summons came via a single curt text from Arthur Sterling. My study, 7 p.m. urgent, bring Sophia. The lack of explanation was typical, but the inclusion of Safi was not. A sliver of unease, cold and sharp, pierced Lexa's usual composure as she stared at the screen in her obsidian and steel office. What fresh hell required both of them? Across town, Safi received a similar, albeit warmer, message from Gabriel. Sweetheart, meet me at Arthur's penthouse tonight. 7 sharp, big family talk, wear something nice. Love, Papa. Safi's heart did a little flip. A big family talk at Arthur Sterling's inner sanctum? Could it be? No, she couldn't let herself hope, but the possibility sent a giddy tremor through her as she pulled out a vibrant emerald green wrap dress, a color Lexa would undoubtedly declare garish. The atmosphere in Arthur Sterling's study was thick with unspoken tension and the scent of expensive leather and aged whiskey. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased a glittering, indifferent Manhattan skyline. Arthur Sterling sat behind his imposing mahogany desk, his expression grave, fingers steepled. Gabriel Rossi paced slightly, radiating nervous energy, his usual joviality subdued. Lexa arrived first, a study in monochrome severity, a perfectly tailored charcoal pantsuit, her platinum. Hair pulled back ruthlessly, her face a mask of cool impatience. She took a seat without a word, crossing her legs and fixing her father with an expectant, slightly bored glare. This better be critical, father. I have the Singapore acquisition review at 8. Safi arrived moments later, a burst of color and warmth invading the sterile space. Papa, Mr. Sterling. Her smile was bright, though her eyes darted nervously between the two men and Lexa's glacial profile. She perched on the edge of a stiff leather armchair opposite Lexa, her hands twisting. The strap of a small sequin bag. Big talk, sounds exciting. Arthur cleared his throat, the sound like gravel shifting. Girls, thank you for coming on short notice. What we have to discuss is fundamental to both families, to the future. Gabriel stopped pacing, placing a reassuring hand on Safi's shoulder. It's about legacy, media, and security. Lexa's icy gaze sharpened. Get to the point. Arthur met her stare unflinchingly. Very well. Sterling Group and Rossi Couture are more than just successful companies. They are institutions built on trust, partnership, and a shared vision. That vision must endure beyond Gabriel and myself. Recent market fluctuations, ... He paused, choosing his words carefully. Double quotes, ... and certain predatory interests have made it clear that our empires are strongest when bound together inextricably. Safi leaned forward, intrigued. A super merger? Like officially combining? Not quite, Gabriel interjected, his voice gentle but firm. More profound than that. We need a bond that transcends boardrooms and stock prices. A bond that signals to the world and to our rivals that our families are united forever. A cold dread colder than anything Lexa had ever manufactured began to pool in her stomach. Her knuckles whitened on the armrest. What are you saying? Arthur locked eyes with his daughter. We're saying, Alexandra, that to secure your inheritance, your position, and the future stability of Sterling Group, you will marry Sophia. Silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the faint hum of the city far below. It was as if the air had been sucked from the room. Lexa didn't move. She didn't blink. The words hung in the air, absurd, monstrous. Marry Safi, the girl, who embodied everything chaotic, emotional, and loud that she despised. The girl whose mere presence felt like sandpaper on her nerves. The girl whose secret glances she pretended not to notice, whose persistent cheer felt like a personal affront. This wasn't a business strategy, it was a grotesque joke. A slow, burning fury ignited within her, so intense it threatened to melt. Her icy control. You, her voice emerged low and dangerously calm, each word dripping with venom, are out of your minds. She stood abruptly, the chair scraping harshly on the polished floor. This is archaic, insulting, insane. Arthur remained unmoved. It is non-negotiable, Alexandra. Sign the prenuptial agreements. Marry Sophia within the month, or your shares are placed in a trust you cannot access until I'm dead. Your position as CEO-elect is revoked. Sterling Group will pass to distant cousins who understand the meaning of duty. The threat was devastating. Sterling Group wasn't just her inheritance. It was her identity, her life's work, the fortress she had built around herself. The thought of losing it, of being cast adrift, was paralyzing. She felt the walls of her meticulously controlled world crumbling. Her gaze snapped to Safi, half expecting to see mirrored horror or at least shock. Instead, Safi sat frozen, her eyes wide, her lips slightly parted. But the emotion flooding her face wasn't horror. It was pure, unadulterated, dawning ecstasy. The crush she had nurtured since childhood, the secret longing she thought was hopeless. It was being handed to her on a silver platter wrapped in corporate necessity. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a joyful bird trying to escape. Mary Lexa, it was everything she'd ever dreamed of, packaged in the most unexpected, dramatic way possible. She saw the fury on Lexa's face, the trapped animal panic beneath the ice. But in that moment, all Safi could feel was the dizzying, terrifying, wonderful possibility. "Papa, Mr. Sterling," Safi breathed, her voice trembling with suppressed emotion. She looked at Lexa, her expression softening with a mix of awe and nascent protectiveness. "Are you ... are you serious?" "Deadly serious, Mia," Gabriel said, his eyes suspiciously bright. He saw his daughter's radiance and felt a pang of hope. This is for the best, for everyone. Lexa saw the look on Safi's face. The hope, the barely contained joy. It was salt in the wound. "Look at her," Lexa hissed, pointing a shaking finger at Safi. "She thinks this is some fairy tale. This is business. Cold, hard, unfeeling business. And you expect me to chain myself to ... to that?" The contempt in her voice was palpable. Safi flinched, the joy dimming slightly, replaced by a flicker of hurt, but the hope didn't vanish. It solidified into determination. "Lexa," she began softly. "Don't," Lexa cut her off, turning back to her father, the fury warring with desperation. "There has to be another way. A merger, a holding company, anything else." "There isn't," Arthur stated flatly. "The market demands a symbol stronger than contracts. A union of bloodlines. Your answer, Alexandra, now. Accept or walk away from everything you've worked for." The ultimatum hung in the air. Lexa looked from her father's implacable face to Gabriel's hopeful one, and finally to Safi, whose eyes held a terrifying mixture of sympathy and unwavering excitement. The enormity of the trap closed around her. Her life, her legacy, her carefully constructed isolation, all balanced on this monstrous demand. The cold dread solidified into a leaden weight in her chest. She had no leverage, no escape route. The fortress she'd built was being used as her prison. The word tore from her throat, raw and choked, tasting like ash. "Fine." Safi couldn't suppress a tiny gasp, her hand flying to her mouth. Her eyes shone like stars. "Lexa, don't, Lexa." Repeated, the word a whip crack. She couldn't bear Safi's happiness right now. It felt like mockery. She turned on her heel, needing to escape the suffocating room, the unbearable reality. "Set it up. Keep it quiet and keep her away from me until it's done." She stormed out, the heavy study door slamming shut behind her with a finality that echoed through the penthouse. Safi sat frozen for a moment, the slam reverberating in her chest. Then the joy surged back, tempered now by the reality of Lexa's reaction. It wouldn't be easy. It would be a battle. But it was a battle for Alexandra Sterling herself. Safi looked at the two fathers, her expression shifting from stunned delight to fierce resolve. "I'll talk to her," she said, rising. "She just needs time and air," Safi thought. "And maybe someone who isn't afraid of the storm." She found Lexa not in the grand foyer, but on the vast empty terrace overlooking the city. The night wind whipped Lexa's pale hair around her face, her rigid back. Turned, shoulders hunched as if against a physical blow. She looked impossibly alone against the glittering backdrop. Safi approached cautiously, her heels clicking softly on the stone. "Lexa," she called softly. Lexa didn't turn. "Go away, Rossi. Revel in your victory elsewhere." "It's not a victory," Safi said, stepping closer, her voice steady despite her racing heart. It's a beginning, a chance. Lexa whirled around, her eyes blazing in the city lights. A chance for what? For you to finally wear me down? To plaster your insufferable sunshine all over my life? This isn't a romance, Sophie. It's a corporate hostage situation. I know that, Sophie retorted, meeting Lexa's fury head on, her own spark igniting. Do you think I'm blind? I see how trapped you feel. But maybe it doesn't have to be hell. Maybe we can make it workable, even. She trailed off, courage momentarily failing her. Workable. Lexa scoffed, a harsh, humorless sound. You live in a world of rainbows and glitter, Sophie. I live in reality. A reality where my father just sold me to secure his empire. A reality where I am now shackled to the human embodiment of a migraine. The stress, the fury, the sheer absurdity of it all boiled over. Her gaze, sharp and panicked, raked over Sophie, taking in her hopeful eyes, the vibrant dress, the sheer overwhelming presence of her. The thought of intimacy, of sharing a bed, of Sophie's boundless energy focused on her, it was terrifying. The words spilled out, raw and offensive, before she could stop them. Will you at least be quiet in bed? The moment the words left her lips, Lexa wanted to claw them back. It was crass. It was rude. It revealed far too much of her own chaotic fear. She braced for outrage, for tears, for Sophie to finally unleash the hurt Lexa knew she must have caused countless times. Instead, Sophie blinked. Then slowly, a smile spread across her face. Not her usual sunny beam, but something deeper, more knowing, tinged with a challenge. It was a smile that acknowledged Lexa's panic, saw through her bluster, and met it head on. She stepped even closer, invading Lexa's personal space, her warm brown eyes locking onto Lexa's startled, icy blues. Her voice dropped to a low, husky murmur, laced with a promise that sent an unexpected jolt straight through Lexa's core. Don't worry, Ice Queen, Sophie said, her gaze unwavering. A hint of that secret crush blazing openly now, mixed with newfound boldness. I'll wear you out every night. Lexa's breath hitched. Her carefully constructed icy facade didn't just crack. It felt like it shattered into a million pieces. Heat flooded her cheeks, a sensation so alien it was dizzying. Her knees actually felt weak. She stared at Sophie, utterly speechless, the wind whipping around them, the city lights blurring. The audacity, the implication, the sheer terrifying certainty in Sophie's eyes. Sophie held her gaze for a charged second longer, that provocative smile lingering before turning gracefully. See you at the altar, Lexa? She tossed over her shoulder, her voice regaining its usual lilt, though now laced with undeniable triumph. She walked back inside, leaving Alexandra Sterling alone on the terrace, the scent of Sophie's perfume lingering in the air, her world irrevocably tilted on its axis, her mind reeling from the shock of the ultimatum and the seismic impact of Sophia, Rosie's bold, breathtaking promise. The war had just begun, but the first unexpected salvo had been fired, and Lexa was left utterly, devastatingly undone. Part 3. The Wedding. The month that followed the ultimatum was a whirlwind of meticulously orchestrated chaos existing in two starkly separate realities. Lexa retreated into a fortress of icy efficiency. She delegated the wedding planning to a small army of her father's most discreet and ruthless event, coordinators with a single hiss command: make it happen. Fast, quiet, minimal contact. She threw herself into sterling group business with punishing intensity, using spreadsheets and hostile takeovers as emotional armor. The few unavoidable meetings about the wedding were exercises in glacial endurance. She chose her attire via curt email, the most severe traditional bridal gown available. White, no lace, no train, minimal. The resulting creation was a masterpiece of minimalist severity, a column of heavy ivory silk satin, razor-sharp tailoring, a high neck, and long sleeves. It looked less like a wedding dress and more like armor plating. Her only concession was a single strand of flawless sterling diamonds, cold, hard, and priceless. She refused a veil, stating it was impractical and sentimental nonsense. Her only attendant was her fiercely loyal, equally stoic chief of staff, Clara, who radiated protective disapproval towards the entire affair. Lexa viewed the approaching date not as a wedding, but as a hostile corporate merger she was being forced to sign in front of witnesses. Sleep became elusive, replaced by late-night scotch and the gnawing dread of Sophia Rose's inevitable radiant presence. Sophie, conversely, embraced the whirlwind with the fervor of a hurricane meeting a field of sunflowers. She collaborated breathlessly with the most sought-after and discreet wedding planner, Colette Laurent. While respecting Lexa's demand for quiet, Sophie ensured the celebration would be an explosion of tasteful, understated luxury, her sunshine filtered through a lens of elegance. Her dress was a secret she guarded fiercely. Designed by her own lead couturier, it was a revelation. Layers of whisper-light ivory silk organza that seemed to float around her, subtly embroidered with tiny sparkling crystal dewdrops that caught the light like morning rain. It had delicate cap sleeves, a modest sweetheart neckline, and a flowing train that hinted at grandeur without ostentation. It wasn't garish, it was luminous. She chose a simple diamond pendant, a gift from her mother, and a small, elegant tiara, woven with fresh baby's breath. Her bridesmaids were her closest bubbly friends who vibrated with excitement and protective loyalty. Sophie spent the weeks in a state of joyful anxiety, practicing her vows, trying on her dress endlessly, and dreaming of the moment she'd see Lexa at the end of the aisle. She knew Lexa's resistance, felt the chill emanating from her across town. But her hope was a stubborn flame fanned by the memory of Lexa's stunned reaction on the terrace. The chosen venue was the Sterling Group's crown jewel, the Celesta, a palatial hotel ballroom transformed into an ethereal winter garden. Thousands of white orchids, lily, and roses bloomed under crystal chandeliers interspersed with delicate silver branches and twinkling fairy lights. It was breathtakingly beautiful and subtly, undeniably cold, a perfect reflection of the Sterling aesthetic. Outside, however, was pandemonium. Despite Arthur Sterling's best efforts, the rumor mill of New York's elite had churned. Paparazzi swarmed the perimeter like sharks. Sterling-Rossi merger of the century. Ice Princess melts for sunshine. The headlines screamed speculation, turning the private ceremony into the city's most anticipated clandestine spectacle. Lexa arrived via a private underground entrance, avoiding the media frenzy. In her stark gown, face meticulously composed into its usual impassive mask, she looked like a statue carved from moonlight and disdain. Clara adjusted the already perfect line of her dress with a grim finality. "Remember, Miss Sterling," Clara murmured, "this is merely a formality. A contractual obligation, maintain decorum." Lexa gave a curt nod, her stomach churning. The soft, romantic strains of the processional felt like mockery as the massive doors opened, revealing the sea of expectant faces, a carefully curated mix of powerful business associates, distant relatives, and Sophie's vibrant inner circle. Lexa drew herself up to her full height. Her walk down the aisle was a study in controlled detachment. Her spine was ramrod straight, her gaze fixed on a point far above the officiant's head. She ignored the soft gasps at her stark beauty, the whispers about her glacial demeanor. She felt exposed, vulnerable in a way boardroom battles never made her feel. The only heat came from the weight of countless stares and the suffocating tightness in her chest. Then the music shifted, swelling into something warmer, more hopeful. The doors opened again. A collective sigh rippled through the room. Sophie stood there, bathed in the soft light filtering through the floral arches. She wasn't just beautiful. She was incandescent. The delicate dress seemed to glow from within, the crystal dew drops catching the light and scattering it like captured stars. Her smile was radiant, genuine, and utterly breathtaking, transforming the cool elegance of the room. Her eyes, shining with unshed happy tears, scanned the guests briefly before locking onto Lexa standing rigidly at the altar. That smile didn't waver. If anything, it deepened, filled with a warmth and determination that seemed to reach across the space. She walked with grace and purpose, her steps light, her gaze never leaving Lexa's face. She saw the ice, the tension, the barely concealed panic, and her own resolve solidified. She would be the warmth. She would be the anchor. As Sophie reached the altar, the contrast was almost painful. Lexa, a monochrome pillar of tension, her jaw clenched, her hands clasped tightly before her, knuckles white. Sophie, a vision of soft light and vibrant life, her eyes soft, a faint blush on her cheeks. She reached out instinctively, her fingers brushing Lexa's cold, stiff ones where they were clasped. Lexa flinched almost imperceptibly, but didn't pull away. The simple touch sent a jolt through Lexa. It wasn't unpleasant, just profoundly alien. Sophie's hand was warm, her touch gentle yet firm. Lexa kept her gaze fixed straight ahead, refusing to meet Sophie's eyes, focusing on the intricate pattern of frost etched onto a nearby silver candelabra. The ceremony was brief and efficient, much to Lexa's relief. The officiant, a distinguished judge known for discretion, kept it simple. When it came time for the vows, Sophie's voice was clear, warm, and resonant, filling the hushed room. I, Sophia Rossi, take you, Alexandra Sterling, to be my lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, for better or for worse, in sickness and in health, to love, cherish, and honor. Sophie infused each word with sincerity, her gaze unwavering on Lexa's profile. All the days of my life. The final words held a weight, a promise that went beyond the legal requirement. Then it was Lexa's turn. She took a shallow breath, the words tasting like ash on her tongue. Her voice, when it came, was low, flat, and clipped, devoid of any inflection. I, Alexandra Sterling, take you, Sophia Rossi, to be my lawfully wedded wife. She paused, the next word sticking, to have and to hold. It felt like a physical effort. For better or worse, mostly worse, her mind supplied bitterly. In sickness and in health, hopefully minimal contact required. She faltered on the next words. To love, cherish, impossible. To honor, she ground out, seizing on the one word that felt remotely businesslike, contractual, all the days of my life. The final phrase was a near whisper, a surrender. The officiant prompted the rings. Sophie slid a simple platinum band onto Lexa's finger. The metal was cool, the fit strangely precise, a tangible shackle. Lexa took Sophie's ring, a delicate band set with a single brilliant diamond, and pushed it onto Sophie's finger with impersonal efficiency, avoiding contact with her skin as much as possible. By the power vested in me, the judge intoned, I now pronounce you married. You may kiss your bride. A beat of absolute silence hung in the air. Lexa froze. Kiss Sophie? In front of all these people, it was the ultimate violation of her carefully guarded boundaries. Panic flared in her icy eyes. Sophie, however, didn't hesitate. She understood Lexa's paralysis. With infinite grace and a gentle, reassuring pressure, on Lexa's still clasped hands, she stepped forward, closing the small distance. She tilted her face up, her eyes soft but unwavering, a silent plea and reassurance in her gaze. Lexa remained rigid, her breath catching. Sophie didn't force it. She simply leaned in, her lips brushing Lexa's with a feather-light chaste pressure. It lasted barely a second, a mere formality. But in that fleeting touch, something unexpected happened. The sheer warmth of Safi's lips, the softness, the faint scent of her floral perfume, combined with the blinding, utterly genuine beam of happiness that broke across Safi's face the moment their lips touched. It hit Lexa like a physical wave. The iron control she'd maintained all day. The carefully constructed walls trembled. Against her will, against every instinct, the very corner of Alexandra Sterling's tightly compressed lips twitched. It wasn't a smile, not quite. It was a fractional, involuntary upward curve, a crack in the permafrost so subtle most missed it, but Safi, centimeters away, felt it. She saw the flicker of surprise in Lexa's eyes, the briefest softening around them. Safi's own smile widened impossibly, radiating pure, triumphant joy. The reception was a masterpiece of opulent tension. Crystal glasses clinked, exquisite food circulated, and a string quartet played tasteful melodies. Lexa moved through the crowd like an elegant ghost, accepting stiff congratulations with minimal nods and monosyllabic replies. She nursed a single glass of champagne, untouched after the first sip. Safi, conversely, was a whirlwind of gracious warmth, chatting easily with guests, her laughter ringing out, her hand occasionally finding Lexa's arm or back in a light, possessive touch that made Lexa stiffen each time. Lexa watched Safi from a distance, a confusing mix of resentment and reluctant fascination warring within her. Safi did look dazzling. The dress, the joy, the effortless way she commanded the room, it was undeniable, and that involuntary twitch of her own lips haunted her. It felt like a betrayal of her own carefully cultivated persona. Their first dance was a study in contrasts. Safi moved with natural grace, her body swaying easily to the slow waltz. Lexa held her at a stiff arm's length, her posture rigid, her steps precise but devoid of feeling. Yet even held in that cold embrace, Safi rested her head lightly against Lexa's shoulder for a moment, sighing contentedly. "We did it, Mrs. Sterling," she murmured. Lexa didn't reply, but her hand on Safi's back tightened infinitesimally. Leaving the Celesta involved another gauntlet of flashing cameras. Lexa shielded her eyes, her expression back to its customary icy disdain. Safi, tucked beside her, waved briefly, her smile still radiant despite the late hour. They were ushered into a waiting Rolls-Royce, the door closing on the cacophony. Inside the plush silence of the car, the reality crashed down. They were married, alone, heading towards Lexa's imposing, sterile penthouse, their shared home. Lexa stared straight ahead, her profile etched in the passing city lights, the platinum band on her finger feeling impossibly heavy. Safi leaned back, exhaustion finally mingling with her happiness. She glanced at Lexa, at the tense line of her jaw, the distant look in her eyes. The battle wasn't over. It had just changed venues. But Safi had seen the crack. She'd felt the tiny twitch. She held on to that sliver of vulnerability like a talisman as the car carried them towards their uncertain, intertwined future. The reluctant marriage had begun. A gilded cage for one, a sunlit dream for the other, now irrevocably locked together. Part 4. First night, first clash. The Rolls-Royce glided through the silent, rain-slicked streets of Manhattan, the cacophony of the paparazzi fading into a distant, unpleasant memory. Inside, the silence was thick, charged, and profoundly uncomfortable. The partition between them and the driver was firmly up, creating a suffocating bubble of newlywed tension. Lexa sat ramrod straight on the cool leather, staring fixedly out the window at the blurred streaks of light. The platinum band on her finger felt like a brand, heavy and alien. Every nerve ending was raw, hyper-aware of Safi's presence mirror. Inches away, Sophie's vibrant emerald dress seemed to radiate heat in the dim interior, a stark, unsettling contrast to Lexa's own monochrome armor. She could smell Sophie's floral perfume, something light, fresh, and infuriatingly persistent, mingling with the scent of rain and expensive car leather. Sophie, leaning back with a sigh that was equal parts exhaustion and residual euphoria, dared. A glance at her wife. Lexa's profile was etched in the intermittent streetlights, sharp, beautiful, and utterly closed off. The tiny twitch of her lips at the altar felt like a lifetime ago, buried under layers of renewed ice. Sophie's heart ached with a confusing mix of triumph and trepidation. She's mine legally, but how do I reach her? She fiddled with her own diamond band, a tangible symbol of the dream she'd fought for, now facing the daunting reality of the fortress she'd breached. Lex's penthouse wasn't a home. It was a monument to controlled perfection, occupying the entire top floor of the Sterling Tower. It was a vast expanse of polished concrete, steel, and glass. The minimalist aesthetic was taken to an extreme. Furniture was stark and angular. Art consisted of abstract monochrome pieces, and the only color came from the breathtaking yet impersonal panorama of the city skyline, visible through floor-to-ceiling windows. The air hummed with silent climate control. It felt less like a living space and more like a high-security gallery where Lexa happened to reside. A discreet butler, Bennett, materialized as the elevator doors slid open into the foyer. His expression, as always, was professionally neutral. "Welcome home, Mrs. Sterling," he intoned, the plural form hanging awkwardly in the air. His gaze flickered briefly, almost imperceptibly, to Sophie. "Thank you, Bennett," Lexa clipped out, already striding towards the heart of the penthouse, shedding her tailored jacket like a second skin. "That will be all for tonight." "Of course, madam." Bennett gave a slight bow and retreated towards the service entrance. Sophie hovered in the vast foyer, feeling like an exotic bird that had accidentally flown into a sterile laboratory. Her small sequin bag looked absurdly out of place on the cold geometric console table. The sheer scale and emptiness of the space were overwhelming. "Wow," she breathed, her voice echoing slightly. "It's very... you." Lexa didn't turn around. "The guest suites are down the west corridor," she stated, her voice devoid of any inflection. "Bennett will have had the sapphire suite prepared for you. It has its own ensuite and sitting room. You'll find everything you need." She continued walking towards the eastern wing, clearly indicating her own territory. "I trust you can find your way." "Good night, Sophie." The dismissal was absolute, colder than the penthouse air conditioning. Lexa didn't just walk to her bedroom. She fled. The sanctuary of her personal space was the only refuge left. Her bedroom was an extension of the penthouse aesthetic, vast, dominated by an enormous platform bed draped in charcoal gray linens facing the panoramic windows. The only concessions to humanity were a state-of-the-art sound system and a meticulously organized walk-in closet visible through an open door. She closed the heavy, sound-dampening door behind her, leaning against it for a moment, closing her eyes. The silence was a relief, but her heart still hammered against her ribs. Alone. Finally, she moved through her nightly routine with robotic precision, removing the heavy diamond necklace, placing it in its vault-like case, meticulously hanging. Up her wedding dress, a task that felt surreal washing, her face with cold water that did nothing to cool the simmering heat beneath her skin. She changed into her customary sleep attire, black silk pajamas tailored and severe. Slipping between the cool, high thread count sheets, she lay rigidly on her back, staring at the ceiling, trying to force her mind blank. Contractual obligation? Separate quarters, maintain boundaries, it's manageable. Down the impossibly long, dimly lit corridor, Sophie stood outside the opulent door of the sapphire suite. It was beautiful, luxurious, impersonal, and utterly freezing. It felt like the most expensive hotel room imaginable. Not a home, not their home. The memory of Lexa's rigid back retreating down the hall, the absolute finality of that goodnight, Sophie, settled over her like a suffocating blanket. The joy of the wedding, the tiny spark she glimpsed, felt galaxies away. No, the thought rose, fierce and stubborn. Sophia Rossi hadn't fought this hard, waited this long, just to be banished to a gilded guest wing on her wedding night. This wasn't about sex. It was about presence. About chipping away at the ice, one stubborn inch at a time. About refusing to be relegated to the periphery of Lexa's life before they'd even begun. Decision made. Safi shed her beautiful emerald dress, leaving it carefully draped over a chair in the impersonal suite. She rummaged in her overnight bag packed with characteristic optimism and pulled out her sleepwear. Not seductive lingerie, but soft. Worn cotton pajama shorts and a faded, oversized t-shirt from a Rossi Couture charity run, covered in rainbows and unicorns. Comfort, authenticity, her bare feet silent as a shadow despite the echoing space, she padded down the cold marble corridor towards the eastern wing. The door to Lexa's room loomed, imposing and closed. Safi took a deep, steadying breath, her heart pounding against her ribs. This was crossing a Rubicon. She turned the heavy handle. To her surprise, it wasn't locked. Interesting. Lexa heard the soft click of the door. Her entire body went rigid. She didn't move, didn't open her eyes. Willing the intrusion to be a mistake, a trick of the building settling. Soft footsteps padded across the thick carpet. The scent of Safi's floral shampoo and warm skin grew closer, cutting through the sterile air. The mattress dipped beside her. Lexa's eyes snapped open. Moonlight streamed through the windows, illuminating. Safi standing beside the bed, looking impossibly young and vulnerable in her ridiculous pajamas, yet radiating an unnerving determination. "What?" Lexa hissed, her voice low and dangerous. "What do you think you're doing?" Safi didn't flinch. She simply pulled back the duvet on the opposite side of the massive bed. "Sleeping," she stated calmly, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "You have a suite," Lexa protested, pushing herself up on her elbows, ice cracking into fury. "A whole wing, practically. This is my room." "And this," Safi said, slipping smoothly under the covers, settling onto the pillow, "is our marriage, which last time I checked involved sharing things, like a bed." She turned onto her side, facing Lexa, her expression serene in the moonlight, though her eyes held a challenging glint. "Unless you plan on filing for annulment before breakfast?" Lexa stared, dumbfounded. The sheer audacity was breathtaking. "Get out." The words were glacial shards. Safi yawned, stretching languidly like a cat, deliberately invading Lexa's personal space bubble. Too tired," she murmured, her voice thick with feigned exhaustion. She snuggled deeper into the pillow, her eyes drifting shut. Long day, emotional whiplash, beating up jerks is tiring. A beat of silence. Then, with perfect, devastating nonchalance, she added, "Don't worry about the sex tonight, Ice Queen." "I'm wiped out." The words landed like a grenade in the silent room. Lexa's furious retort died on her lips. Sex tonight. The very idea, voiced so casually, so dismissively by Safi in her absurd unicorn shirt, short-circuited Lexa's brain. Heat flooded her face, a scorching wave that clashed violently with the icy fury of moments before. Her carefully constructed arguments about boundaries, privacy, contractual obligations evaporated. She was left gaping, utterly speechless, her heart pounding a frantic tattoo against her ribs. She's not. She didn't mean. She's just sleeping. Safi, eyes still closed, a faint, knowing smile playing on her lips, shifted again. Her knee bumped gently against Lexa's thigh under the covers. Her arm flopped out, her hand coming to rest lightly, innocently on the pillow between them, fingers brushing the edge of Lex's silk sleeve. The warmth radiating from her was palpable, a living furnace in the cool, controlled space. Lexa remained frozen, rigid as a statue. Every instinct screamed to shove her out, to yell for Bennett, to retreat to another room herself. But her body betrayed her. The unexpected, shocking warmth of Safi's proximity was not unpleasant. It was alien, terrifyingly so, but the sheer solidity of her, the soft rhythm of her breathing already deepening towards sleep, created a strange counterpoint to Lexa's own frantic tension. The scent of her warm skin, clean cotton, faint floral shampoo was no longer just an irritant. It was a tangible presence weaving through the sterile air. Minutes stretched. Safi's breathing grew slow and even, her body relaxing into the mattress, her warmth seeping into the space between them. Lexa didn't move. She lay stiffly, staring at the ceiling, acutely aware of every point where Safi's body almost touched hers, the brush of cotton against silk, the shared heat beneath the duvet. The furious blush slowly receded, replaced by a bewildering, unfamiliar sensation, a strange, reluctant warmth spreading through her chest. Unrelated to anger. It was the warmth of shared space, of another living, breathing presence disrupting her profound isolation, too tired for sex. The absurdity of it, the sheer disarming casualness after Safi's bold terrace promise and the intense wedding day finally registered. A tiny, incredulous puff of air escaped Lexa's lips. Not quite a laugh, but something perilously close to it. She quickly stifled it, turning her head slightly to look at the sleeping form beside her. Safi looked peaceful, almost childlike. Her dark hair fanned out on the pillow, the faint moonlight catching the curve of her cheek. Lexa huffed, a sound of pure, exasperated annoyance. She pulled her arm away from the point of contact, turning resolutely onto her side, facing away from Safi and the distracting view of the city. She drew the covers up tightly, creating a small fortress within the fortress. Unbelievable, she muttered into the darkness, the word lacking its usual venom. Utterly unbelievable. But she didn't get up. She didn't call Bennett. She didn't retreat. She lay there, stiff as a board, trapped between icy fury and the insidious, unwelcome warmth radiating from the human embodiment of chaos and sunshine, sleeping soundly beside her. The fortress had been breached. The war for their marriage, for Alexandra Sterling's very soul, had found its most intimate battlefield, their shared bed. And the first skirmish had ended not with a bang, but with Sophia Rossi's disarmingly effective, utterly confounding, strategic withdrawal into sleep. Part 5. Flowers, Coffee, and Sunshine. The morning after the Great Bed Invasion dawned gray and cold over Manhattan, mirroring the atmosphere inside Alexandra Sterling's penthouse, at least in the eastern wing. Lexa awoke stiff and disoriented, the unfamiliar warmth beside her a jarring presence. Safi was still asleep, curled on her side, one hand resting palm up near Lexa's pillow, breathing softly. The sight was profoundly unsettling. Lexa extricated herself from the bed with the silent precision of a soldier avoiding a landmine, retreating to her cavernous, clinically organized bathroom. The long, hot shower felt less like cleansing and more like an attempt to scald away the lingering sensation of shared body heat and the faint, persistent scent of Safi's floral shampoo. By the time Lexa emerged, wrapped in a thick charcoal gray robe, Safi was gone. The other side of the bed was neatly made, the ridiculous unicorn pajamas nowhere to be seen. A profound, illogical sense of absence prickled at Lexa before she ruthlessly squashed it. Good, boundaries reestablished. She dressed with her usual meticulous care, a sharp dove gray pantsuit, A pristine white silk blouse, her hair pulled back into a severe chignon, donning her armor piece by piece. Her office at the top of the Sterling Tower was her true sanctuary. A vast minimalist space dominated by a monolithic black marble desk, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a commanding, impersonal view of the city, and walls lined with sleek, handleless cabinets concealing the intricate machinery of her empire. The air hummed with quiet efficiency and the faint scent of ozone from the electronics. It was a place of absolute control, devoid of clutter, distraction, or color. Lexa had barely settled into her ergonomic throne, the first stack of acquisition. Reports demanding her attention when a soft knock interrupted the sterile silence. Before she could growl, "Enter," the door swung open. Sophie stood there, a vision of chaotic warmth against the icy backdrop. She wore a flowing buttercup yellow dress that seemed to generate its own light. Her hair was loosely piled up, escaping in artful tendrils. In her hands, she held two things: a large, steaming takeout cup emitting a rich, enticing aroma, and a small, shockingly vibrant bouquet of deep red carnations and sunshine yellow daisies wrapped in crisp brown paper. "Morning, Mrs. Sterling," Sophie chirped, her voice bright but carefully modulated, stepping into the room as if she belonged there. She placed the coffee cup squarely in the center of Lexa's immaculate desk, right on top of a projected revenue. Spreadsheet, double espresso, splash of cream, no sugar. Just how you take it. She then placed the bouquet beside it, the splash of red and yellow violently clashing with the monochrome perfection. Lexa stared, momentarily speechless. The intrusion was bad enough. The placement was sacrilege. The colors were an assault. "What?" she managed, her voice dangerously low. "Is this?" "Coffee," Sophie stated as if explaining to a child, "and flowers. Thought your office could use a little cheer." She beamed, gesturing at the offending blooms. "Carnations for fascination, which you are endlessly. Daisies for innocence and new beginnings." "Fitting, don't you think?" Lexa's jaw tightened. "It is unnecessary and messy and distracting."